Good morning. Thank you so much for joining me again. Before I start introduce this week's episode, can I just say thank you so much to everybody who has watched the videos, subscribed, left lovely comments and likes and stuff. So it's a lonely old job doing this, but the thought of somebody else enjoying the content is what keeps me going. So thanks ever so much for that. It's been truly overwhelming, so thank you. Today, it's a slightly different video to normal. I'm at the falling Foss waterfalls, and it's been a bit of a difficult scramble to get down here. And as you could probably, I don't know whether you can tell actually, I think I can, this looks like it's lacking a lot of water. You're going to see this in probably November. But I'm recording this at the end of August, and we haven't had an awful lot of rain in the UK. We still, however, have a beautiful waterfall, and that's what this vlog is going to be about. So this is going to be a how-to photograph a waterfall vlog, okay? And I'm going to explain to you how to photograph a waterfall to get this kind of effect, as opposed to this kind of effect. And I'm going to go through the equipment that you're going to need first of all. So let's talk about clothing. I mean, you can wear whatever you like. Going through the waterfalls here, you're going to be in water, so wellies or waterproof walking boots are really good. This is really precarious, so I'm wearing my walking boots. I'm covered in mud, but I need to have something with a sole, with a grip on the sole that's really safe, because we're going up and down very steep banks. And often rocks are very slippery as well, so be very careful, because you're dealing with rocks and water, and the two things make for a very slippery environment, so be careful. So wellies or walking boots. Now I'm going to explain how to photograph waterfalls with this, i.e. a phone, because there's no reason why you shouldn't produce really good photographs of waterfalls with phones, and I'll go through that in a second. But I've also got with me my SLRs, so I've got, DSLRs, mirrorless DSLRs. I've got my XT2 with, only reason I've got this with me is, well, I've got a spare body, but I'm not going to be shooting on this, but I need this long telephoto. This is a 50 to 140 telephoto for the detail shots I'll talk to you about later. I have got my 10 to 24 on my XT4 because I want to get some wide angle foreground shots, which again I'll talk you through. And I've also got my mid-range zoom, which is my 16 to 55. Okay, that's the lens I use the most. I normally have that on the camera all the time. It's my main focal length, my main zoom lens, I'd say. But I know today that I want to get some really wide angle, trying to pick out some leaves, maybe there's some ferns I can see already over here that are going to be really nice. But also, the main interest really for this photograph is that big tree. If you can see it, the big tree that's fallen down. A little detailed shot of that is going to be really good. Now, I could just come here and handhold this and snap it, but what I want to do is blur the water so we get this lovely milky finish that you've seen. And the way that's done is with a long exposure. Now, exposure is made up of three things. You may not even know this because your camera, your phone, will automatically compensate and get the correct exposure as correct as it can be. They're very, very clever nowadays. My iPhone will turn the flash on if it needs to, although sometimes it doesn't work quite successfully. But excuse me. But it'll also do long exposures. And I'll show you how to do that. It's really simple. If you have live view, so this is, I'm talking about Apple now. If you have, and this is from the 12 upwards, if you have live view on, you can edit it and choose long exposure. However, what you need to do, you want the water to blur, and not the camera movement. So you can handhold it if you're very still, but also you could just grab one of these little mini tripods, not a lot of money, and you can get a head that goes on the top there, which will hold your phone in place. I've got mine in the car, I've got no more space in my bag today, but there, I'll put a link down below so you can see. And with that, I could just rest that on a rock. You can see that keeps it very steady. Okay, so that works really well with the phone. I was talking about exposure, so let's go back to that, the exposure triangle. Exposure is made up of three things: sensitivity of either the sensor or the film, shutter speed, and aperture. So talking about sensitivity first, in my day with film, it's called ASA, it used to be called, the American Standards Association, I think it stood for. And the lower the ASA, the less sensitive the film was, but the better the quality, the smaller the grain of the film. And that's transferred into ISO, which we now use, International Standards Organization. So again, the lower the ISO, the better the quality. Modern cameras are getting so good now, you can shoot happily up to 400 to 800 ISO, and I don't think you'd be able to tell unless you print it up really, really big. But I always use the lowest ISO, and that is exactly what we want for waterfalls. Aperture, it's not the order I said them, but I'm going to swap them over. So aperture is the size of the hole in the lens that lets the light through. Okay, so if it's a really bright scene, your camera will shut the aperture down so there's not much light gets through to the sensor. If it's a dark scene, it'll open it up. Now, that's quite straightforward. The pluses and minuses of that, the smaller the aperture, the more depth of field, so things in focus. So if you look here, that and the waterfall would be in focus at something like f11, depending on the focal length of the lens. And a wide open aperture, you've got the lovely bokeh that you see out of focus circles. You get that portrait where you can sit focused on the eyes and everything else is blurry behind you. You can actually see that effect from the camera now because your camera is set to f3.5. So that's the aperture. And the thing that we're most concerned about today is shutter speed. Now, to get that blurry water, milky water effect that I love so much, we need to have the shutter open for a long time because we need the water to be moving through and therefore becoming blurred actually, but it ends up being like very, very milky. So I'm going to be looking at some long exposures today. Now, in here it's fairly dark anyway. It's fairly early in the morning, so I wanted to get here before the crowds arrived. It's fairly dark anyway, but I've also brought with me one of these, and this is a neutral density filter. This is called a little stopper, and it gives me is it a little stopper? Yeah, 6 stops of light. It's like putting a pair of sunglasses on the camera. So if I show you now, the camera kind of adjusts to it anyway, but that completely darkens down or completely inhibits any light coming through. So it's like putting a pair of dark shades on, and that will allow the shutter speed to, actually one of the 3 things can happen. I could turn the ISO up, don't want to do that. I could open the aperture, don't really want to do that for this. Want the aperture to stay about f11 for the best quality, ISO 80 for the best quality. I want the shutter speed to go longer. Now, I could be photographing here probably 2-4 minutes, something like that, and that will give me a long time for the water to move through the picture. Everything else is staying completely still. Any leaves here that are blowing around will move, but that's okay, I'm all right with that. But the water will completely move around, so we just need to see what it's doing. It's not doing a great deal, to be fair. It's basically that back wall I need to be looking at. Okay, so that's how I'm going to get my dark exposure. With an iPhone, you can buy polarizers and neutral density filters for them now. I'm sure you can for Samsung. You can also buy apps, or you can also have free apps actually, that will produce a long exposure. That will shut down the aperture of the phone as well. So you can still do it with a phone. The other thing I've got, which I fell over onto yesterday and cracked, is my polarizer. Okay, and that just takes the reflection, and we can see that. You twist it, there we go. If you can see that just about, if you look at the water here, there, just watch the, you can just see, I don't know whether you can see that brilliantly actually, but I'll show you in camera. That just takes the reflections off the water, gives you more saturation, gives you more richness in the greens. So to that really finishing touch for this, and you don't really want reflections off the sky. So it's fairly dark in here, but I still think that's going to be a useful thing. Also, that has the benefit of slowing the shutter down by a couple of stops as well, so it may well be that will be enough. Okay, so a variety of lenses, but you can use one lens. Filters, but you don't have to. Okay, you just need to keep the camera still and the exposure long. That's the technique, really. Right, I'm going to go and find some compositions, and I'll get back to you when I'm in position. Bit precarious. And so I've got the first composition going. I'm ready to go. My tripod rested on this rock, one leg up there, two down there. I'm going to use this piece of fern and bracken, which I really like. Then we've got the water and the stones. There's another stone off in the distance there. Then we've got the tree and the waterfall. Got a polarizer on the front to minimise reflections. I'm going to put on this little stopper. That should give me exposure of somewhere around 4 minutes. Okay, so I'll put that in there now, so slide that in. I'm getting a little bit of, wouldn't say it's flare, but where it's bright at the top of the waterfall, which you can't see, a little bit of light coming in, so I'm going to hold my hand over the front like some kind of shade. Right, let's have a look at that. Now on the XT4, if you have one, there is a button on the shutter called T, and that allows you to adjust the exposure. So we're on, if I go to 3 minutes, the histogram looks fine. So that's going to give me a 3-minute exposure, but I am going to need to just tweak it back that way a bit. There we go. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more actually, because I'm getting just a bit of flare at the top. Now I've already focused this, that's important. 2-second timer, so lay the camera shake to stop. Here we go. If I get out of your way, you'll be able to see. Now on the back of the camera, on the screen, very cleverly now comes up a timer. Oh, that's saying 8 minutes. I've now got an 8-minute exposure. It's just possibly a little bit too long. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to turn the camera off, because I don't need an 8-minute exposure. So I'm going to turn it back on. Nothing else has changed. But what I'm going to do is open up, because that's on f16, and you don't need that at all. If I go down to f11, should give me enough depth of field. And then we're going to come back to 4 minutes. There we go, that looks better already. Histogram looks fine. 80 ISO, f11, 4 minutes. I'll come back to you in a second. Still about a minute to go. But actually, I'll get down a bit lower so I can speak to you. Actually, this to me is what I love about landscape photography, this slowing down, taking your time. It's like using a 5.4 or a 10x8 camera, and which I used to really enjoy. So you're really taking your time to concentrate on the composition, make sure everything is perfect. Checking, 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 taking a breath, bang. And I feel like this is crafting this image. It's not just a snap, it's something that's going to be, because the fact there's a long exposure, I could have a torch out and be shining a torch around as well, and to light bits up, and that's how lots of these nighttime photographs done with drones and stuff. So I enjoy that actually, it's really nice, but it's just a lovely day. Nobody here, so it's about 7 in the morning on a Friday, no one's around. I got the whole place to myself, and probably will have for a while. It's very difficult to get down here. So I've got another composition in mind just over there. We'll do that one next. I'll show you this one. 1 second left. There we go. I'll show you what this is, and I'll show you whether I blended it in the end or went with one of the 2 exposures that I've taken. I'm going to put the ISO up to 160, I think. I don't need a 4-minute exposure. A 2-minute exposure would be fine. I don't think 4 minutes doing anything apart from wasting 2 minutes of my time. So I'll put the ISO up to 160. It gives you another stop, and I'm going to move over there and see if I can't capture another image that I've had a look at quickly. So I've gone to a vertical composition, a portrait composition, because of this. There's a rock here. I don't know if you can see it. It's got this one here. It's got a hole in the top. It's like an old wheel. So that's quite interesting. So the way a portrait shot works better is because of that, and then this leads us into here, and then across into there. Landscape, we got lots of space over here, which I don't really want. So when I do the landscape shot, I'm going to move forward, cut this rock out, and just use this, and that to hold the foreground interest. I'll go and shoot that now. As ever, I'll put it on the screen. Let me know what you think. And the final exposure of the day is going to be here. I managed to get the 1 tree trunk in, and these lovely, lovely greens on the other side of the waterfall. 2-minute exposure, f13, 2-second timer. Looks fantastic. So thank you very much for joining me again. I hope you've enjoyed this quite different episode today. And just to prove that you can do it with an iPhone, I'm going to grab my iPhone, do a picture here, and I'll show you that as well. So I'll leave you with the images. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. It does help the channel an awful lot. Thanks so much for your support so far. Until next time then, goodbye.
So to create a long exposure on an iPhone, make sure you've got live turned on. It's one of the options when you're on the camera app. Once you've shot the picture, if you open the photo in the Photos app, top left you'll see that button, and if you click on the drop down arrow, this appears. Click on long exposure, and then the phone will process it, and you get that lovely silky water effect. Just remember to hold the phone as still as you can. And there we go.